Good morning. Just a quick reminder to silence your cell phones. I'm here to introduce Governor Candidate. This is Christian Morales' first venture into politics. Born into Guatemala, raised by highly educated and successful parents, his family immigrated during the 1970s Cold War to embrace the United States values. Armed with a bachelor's in management and a master's in industrial and labor relations from Cornell University, Christian's love for the Constitution and career experience support his determination to improve California's economy, immigration issues, and our basic freedoms. Please welcome Governor Candidate Christian Morales.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. My name is Christian Morales, Cristiano Morales. I'm a candidate for Governor of California. Thank you for having me here today. It's truly an honor and a privilege, given where I came from in terms of my family and my upbringing. As Joanna mentioned, I was born in the small Central American country of Guatemala in the late 70s. When I was 2, we came to the United States searching for freedom. My dad ended up getting his PhD at Purdue University in genetics. And as academics, both my parents pursued the American dream for themselves. My mom, just telling you a little bit about my backstory, my mom ended up getting a master's degree, and my mom was probably one of the only 5 women in Central America, not just Guatemala, that ended up getting an advanced education. It's just something that women did to do back then in that generation. The reason why I mention that is I make a hallmark of coming to Republican Women Federated events to talk about my message and my candidacy and my viability and electability, because ultimately the women of California are going to decide whether or not I'm going to be moving on past the next round. So I'm making this speech is directly towards this community of women here in Temecula. So what makes me the best candidate to move forward? So I've worked for 20 years in manufacturing. The latest role that I worked in was in the defense-based industry, the defense-based sector, industrial sector, which required some of the highest security clearances. Being somebody that came to this country legally, as you can imagine, having to go through the process on a federal government level of attaining a security clearance means that you led a good life. It means that you led a clean life and you did things the right way. And I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't have had the privilege of building products that our troops ultimately used if it wasn't for the way my parents brought me up. And also, more importantly, it speaks to volumes in terms of my character. And I think that's important because there's a lot of candidates in this race, but I'm making my character the centerpiece of my race. I believe I'm somebody that's honest, trustworthy, and level-headed. So I appreciate your time today with what I'm about to say. So after working for more than 20 years in the manufacturing industry, living here in California, I'm not sure you guys are aware of this. I'm going to throw some statistics, so please bear with me. More than 300 companies have relocated out of the state since 2019. And people ask me, Christian, how can we win a race? Republicans haven't been successful in the governorship for more than 16 years. And it's not like we lost by a couple percentage points. We lost by a significant amount. So I'm not going to rehash the past. I'm talking about the now and the future, and how the Republican Party, under the leadership of Christian Morales, is going to be more successful. So first of all, I'm making a direct pitch to the working class of this state. I understand every community has its own issues, but if we're going to win as Republicans, we need to attract new voters. The person here before me that was speaking obviously was talking about how registration rates have fallen. And that's actually something that brought light to my eyes, because here's a couple more statistics. 47% of the state are registered Democrats, 25% are registered Independents, and 24% of the state are registered Republicans. So any Republican candidate that moves on past the primary election is going to have to get support from Democrats and Independents. That's just a fact. That's a reality. And I think I'm the best person that will be able to win over those two communities better than, with all due respect to the other candidates, better than anybody else because of certain qualifications. So first of all, I mentioned my manufacturing background. I'm a factory guy. I'm comfortable with people from the working class. I'm approachable. And I've had the privilege of working with some of the best people throughout my career in the manufacturing sector. And I'm fighting for it. That's the most important thing. because all these companies cannot have success here in California because of the regulations and the high business taxes. The second thing, I'm the only person running a fully bilingual campaign. Estoy yendo a la comunidad, estoy hablando con ellos. I'm going to the community and I'm talking directly to them, making a pitch directly to that community. Ronald Reagan famously said, Hispanic people are Republicans, they just don't know it. We know we are. Trust me, we know we're God-fearing, we know we're conservative, we know we're really Republicans. So why do we vote that way? Well, there's a couple of issues that have really prevented the majority of Latinos in the state of California from voting for the Republican Party. And I think part of it is we haven't really reached out to them enough. And yes, I'm sure there's certain instances throughout the state of certain candidates that have done an excellent job of doing that, but on the whole, as a party, I believe we failed that community, that specific community. And not signaling out that one community by themselves, they represent 40% of the state, 40. So if we're going to win as a party, we obviously need to make inroads in that community. And I think somebody like myself that is part of that community, somebody like myself that immigrated to this country, somebody like myself that knows the culture, speaks the language, has an understanding for all the issues that they care about, which, to be honest, are no different than the issues that people here have in this room, except maybe they obviously don't voice it enough. So that's the first thing I want to mention. The second thing is I've had the privilege of working with the Asian community in my factories in the electronics space, and principally in Orange County, and I've made inroads and good relationships with them, whether it's the Vietnamese community, the Cambodian community, the Chinese community, etc. That I've made a direct pitch to them, because one of the issues that they care about the most is school choice. And I'm the product of school choice. I ended up going to some of the best universities because my parents made decisions early on in my life. I got to go to an American school, and yes, there's an American school in Guatemala, right? There's an American school in Mexico, and we lived for a brief period of time in Mexico City. And then here in the United States, I went to the third best educational school system in the whole country in West Lafayette, Indiana, where I was raised. So I have a firm understanding of how important education is to that community. And to my final point, it brings me to relatability. And I think I'm somebody that's very relatable to people. I'm approachable, I work in a factory like I mentioned, and people just feel comfortable with considering to vote for me. And I'll share with you a story that I had here recently. I was at an event in Napa last week, and a gentleman, the cook, came up to me after the speech, and he was like, Cristian, gracias por venir. And then he went on and said, thank you for coming. And then, Cristian, he vivido en este país por 40 años, pero soy americano. Christian, I've lived in this state for 40 years, but I'm American. Now think about that. Christian, I've lived in this state for 40 years, but I'm American. Of course he's an American. But yet something in him still makes him feel like something is wrong. So he doesn't feel comfortable, and I have an understanding as to the why. And to me, this is where I feel I'm the best person as the Republican candidate to really go into these communities, and I can get them to listen to me. Because let's face it, it's difficult in some circles when you say you're a Republican. I was at an event last night online on Twitter Spaces at a candidate forum, and it got kind of heated because they're like, oh, you're a Republican, I'm never going to vote for you. And yet they were complaining about just about every issue people in this room would have concerns about. And I reminded them that the Democrats have been in power for more than 16 years on the governorship level. Well, I'm not going to consider a Republican. I'm like, well, you're kind of giving me a hard chance. You're not giving me the opportunity to offer my perspective, because nothing's going to change if you don't change your mindset in terms of how to vote. So, to me, I can at least get people that probably would never consider voting for the Republican Party more so than any other candidate for governor, and that's what I've done. I've done 30-some candidate forums in Spanish, so I'm really making a pitch to that community more than any other candidate, with all respect to all the other candidates. And I'm sure at the end of the day, there's candidates in this field that perhaps you guys have met, perhaps you guys like, perhaps you guys support. And I completely respect that. But at the end of the day, the question, the challenge that I ask every voter, not just the people in this room, the voters across the state of California that are voting for a Republican, is that person have a path to win? Can they win? And more importantly, can they attract Democrats and independents? Because at the end of the day, okay, it's great. Primary election, somebody wins. But then we saw what happened with Mary Gary Elder, with all due respect to him. We saw what happened, obviously, with John Cox, with Neil Kashkari, and with Meg Whitman. We need somebody that connects with the people of California. Not just because they're a Republican, but because they sincerely connect with them with all the challenges this state is facing. I understand there's people in this room that are concerned with many issues, and probably some are more important than another. You know, it may be water issues, it may be energy issues, it may be critical race issues, it may be abortion now that obviously became a little bit at the forefront here in the recent weeks. It may be your small business has been suffering because of the regulations and stemming from the vaccine mandates. So there's a lot of issues that are important to this community. We have the highest poverty rate in the state. We have the highest unemployment rate. We're the second least affordable state for housing. And yet, I agree with the speaker, with the person before me talking about the race in Pennsylvania. Yes, divided we fall. So we need to unite behind one candidate. And what I'm asking this community, the women of this community more specifically, is to unite behind me. Because I sincerely believe, look me up, evaluate me. If we nominate somebody that's in the slightest way polarizing, we're not going to win. So we need to unite somebody that has the right character, somebody that can really make an inroads, finally, to make the Republican Party, not just the Republican Party, the California Republican Party, viable again in this state. And I'll close with saying something here, a little bit more personal here. And I know that this may be a little bit of a toxic issue, so please bear with me. So immigration, I know, is going to become front and center in this election. I'm surprised it hasn't yet, because of Title 42, whether it's rescinded or not. Okay? I'm a product of immigration, legal immigration. Okay? My family came here legally. And to be honest, unfortunately, we waited 20 years, 20, and in 1999 we became U.S. citizens. And the reason I mention this is because 30% of the state are foreign born. 30% of Californians are foreign born. A lot of people don't know that. 30. So 3 in every 10 people in California was not born in this state. And in order for us to be successful, at the end of the day, we need to obviously attract people different than us. And there's a lot of immigrants that came to this country legally. So, in my opinion, I was in Silicon Valley last week, which obviously has a lot of people from around the world that came here to work, obviously, in the tech sector. All of them, I dare say, should be considering voting for the Republican Party, because they come from places like myself that are far more conservative than the United States. I mean, the place of my birth, abortion is something that is just not allowed, for example. Okay? We're also strong gun rights advocates. So we should be finding commonalities, shared values with anybody from wherever you are in the world. So, because ultimately, we need to find, like the person before me said, we need to find a way to win. The Democrats are good at parsing things up and dividing us. And I feel that someone like myself, who has an understanding of not just how to win, but a strategy of how to win, I think at the end of the day is the best path forward for us. Because everyone in this room, I know, come November 8th, is going to be sitting here frustrated if we don't win. Or even if at least we're not competitive. We can't have another landslide win. So I ask the people in this room to please consider me for candidate for governor of California, and I ask you to please, really, this vote matters. Everybody says this election means the most in every election, but this election matters the most because it really matters the direction of our state. We've already fallen to 3rd place in registration rates in terms of political affiliation in the state of California. We even have an independent in our race that certain Republicans are supporting. This is abdominal. I mean, we should be supporting Republicans and Republican ideals. As somebody that's a lifelong conservative and a lifelong Republican, we need to support the Republican Party for us to move forward. So I ask for your consideration, and again, thank you again to the Temecula Republican Women Federated for having me here today. It's truly an honor and privilege. Thank you so much. Thank you.